So you're in a speech class, and guess what? You have to give a speech right away. You might have a few butterflies in your stomach, or you might be feeling complete and utter terror. Trust me when I say that those are common reactions to doing something unfamiliar, especially where you are the center of attention. I would say don't worry, but I know you're probably going to anyway. So what I will say is this. Right now, the most important thing is for you to get up in front of this audience and just talk to us. You've got to break the ice, and the sooner you do it, the better. You're probably thinking, well, I don't even know where to start. Even though we'll be spending the semester learning all the tools required to put together an effective speech, there are a few basic tips and tricks I can show you that are going to help you put together a little introduction speech, and it's going to do two things. First, it will give you an understanding of what it feels like and looks like from your perspective to stand up in front of this audience and present information to us. And second, when combined with everyone else's introduction speech, it will help us understand the makeup of this particular audience, because the more we know about each other, the more you'll be able to adapt the rest of your speeches to this audience. So, let's get started. The first thing you need to do is to understand the assignment. For this class, the first speech is always fairly short, usually 2 to 3 minutes in length, and the topic is something you're very familiar with, yourself. Because you already know about yourself, you won't have to do any research, but you will need to think creatively about yourself and your life. You have 3 choices on how to proceed. First, you could bring an item that has real meaning to you. Tell us why it means something to you and how it's affected your life. Some examples might be a childhood toy, a favorite movie, concert tickets, souvenirs from a trip, or something else. Second, you could describe an important person in your life. Tell us about that person, in particular how they've affected you and made you into the person you are today. Some examples might be a relative, a friend, or even a famous person that you've never met but that you hold up as an ideal. Finally, you might describe a specific memorable incident or event in your life. Tell us why it's memorable and what effect it had on you. Some examples could be births, deaths, awards, illnesses, joyous, or even sad occasions. Pick only one of these things. You don't have time to do them all. And organize your thoughts so that you can explain them to us in a clear and interesting way. If it's something amusing, by all means use words and body language to point out the humor in it. If it's sad or serious or dramatic, use your creativity to bring that out as well. It's up to you, but you need to remember to organize it correctly. So, how do you organize it? Well, all good speeches have 3 specific parts: an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. As you can see by this chart, the body of the speech is the largest part. That's where you put the majority of your information. But you need an introduction to set the audience up to want to hear what you have to say in the body. And you need a conclusion to summarize your information and put a good ending on it so the audience will remember it. So let's look at what belongs in each of those 3 parts of your speech. First, the introduction. The purpose of the introduction is to get the audience's attention and make them interested in listening to you and your topic. What you don't want to do is start by saying, "My topic today is," or "I'm going to talk about," because you don't want to blurt that out. You want to lead into it. You need to come up with a good opening line, something that leads well into the topic. For instance, if you want to talk about that once-in-a-lifetime trip to Italy that you got to take last year, start your speech by saying something like, "Most of us have a dream vacation in our minds to a place we can only hope to go one day. Well, my dream came true last year when I got to go to the country of my ancestors, Italy." Starting with a sentence like that is a lot better than starting with something like, "So last year I went to Italy." Then you want to briefly tell us what your speech is going to be about. Yes, we know it's about your trip, but exactly what about that trip are you going to tell us? Remember, this is brief because you'll be going into more detail in the body of the speech. So something like, So today I'm going to take you on a little trip to Italy so you can see it through my eyes. I'll tell you about the things I saw in Pisa, Venice, and of course, Rome. So now you're at the body of your speech. This is the part where you go into detail. In order to be clear and effective, this part needs to be organized very well. While there are lots of organizational patterns for speeches, right now you really only need to know about two of them, chronological and topical. For the Italy speech, you might want to do it chronologically in the order you visited the cities. So if you first went to Pisa, then to Venice, then to Rome, well, first you talk about Pisa, what you saw and did there, then you talk about Venice, and finally you talk about Rome. That's chronological. But what if you're doing your speech about a person who influenced you? Maybe you want to tell us about two characteristics that your father has that taught you to be a better person. Well, then you could focus first on one characteristic. Let's say he's a very hard worker and he instilled that sense of pride in getting the job done, and talk about examples of that. Then move on to another quality. Maybe he instilled a love of music in you, so give examples of that and how that affected you. That's topical. You're discussing two separate things about him. Remember, you don't have a lot of time, so you only want to talk about 2 or 3 things. Don't try to do too much. Now you need a conclusion to end the speech. There's nothing more confusing to an audience than a speaker who just stops talking without having a good, solid closing. Conclusions are generally fairly short, but they are important. One thing you don't want to do is say, "That's all," or "I'm done," or "I don't have anything else," or something like that. You can do better. You should, however, signal that you're in the conclusion by saying something like, "In conclusion," or "To sum up my speech," or any number of things. Then you want to summarize and end on a strong note, something that leaves us satisfied. Here's a possible conclusion for the Italy speech. So, I hope that the little imaginary trip to Italy we took today gave you some insight into this beautiful country. Maybe I even inspired you to visit Italy for real someday. Thank you. Thank you is always a good way to end, but only if the thing that came before gives it a sense of closure. In this class we speak extemporaneously, which means prepared and practiced but not necessarily memorized, and we certainly don't read our speeches. This is not a reading class. That was in 4th grade and you're all grown up now, so no reading your speeches. It's very important for you to look at and acknowledge your audience while you're talking to them. It's not necessary to completely memorize your speech either, although you should know it fairly well. That's what rehearsals and speaking notes are for. You can have them to refer to, and there should be enough information in them to keep you on track. You'll need to rehearse your speech. How do you do that? Well, start by reading it out loud several times just to get familiar with the flow of it. Make sure you time yourself while reading it, because timing is very important in speech presentation. You want this speech to fall within 2 to 3 minutes, not under it or over it. If it's too long, you might have to cut out a few sentences. If it's too short, you might need to go into more detail on one of your points. Present the speech to a friend or family member and then have them give you some feedback. Don't skimp on rehearsal. It's important. And when you come to class to give that speech, come prepared. That's the best way to reduce any nervousness you might feel. Your nervousness probably won't go away entirely, but just remember that everyone else in the class is feeling the same way, so you're not alone. When it's your turn to speak, come to the front of the room, stand facing us, smile and gesture naturally, look at us, and look at your notes as necessary. If you focus on getting your story out to the audience rather than on how you're feeling, your anxiety will take a back seat and you'll make a real connection with this audience. Okay, so now you have the basic tools necessary to create a short introductory speech. I can't wait to hear your speech and learn more about you.